Okay, well today we're going to start a two-part series on the ever-interesting debate between creation and evolution. And then we're going to throw in theistic evolution just like sprinkles on the sundae, okay? But let me just say this, that today we're going to begin with the basics of creation. We're going to begin our very in-depth probe about evolution. Next week, we're going to finish it. We'll finish evolution, we'll talk about theistic evolution. All right, so no whining about where we have to stop where we do today, all right? That's all I can say, because I'm probably going to be pretty wound up by then. All right. Let's just pray before we get started. Holy Father, we acknowledge that you are God. We exalt your name. We recognize that you are the creator of all that there is and the maintainer of all that you've created. And God, we ask that you would help us today as we sit and we listen to scientific evidence and people's opinions and all this stuff, that you would allow us to hear what you have to say to us. Right? Because none of this makes sense until you allow it to make sense to us. And for all the people that are out there sitting in the audience, that are sitting somewhere watching this online, that have already decided that this is not even close to true. All right? Some people that are out searching for the truth, we ask that you would open their eyes and allow them to see the truth, that it would open their eyes and break their hearts and cause them to submit their lives for whatever you ask of them. We ask in the name of Jesus so that you are glorified. Okay, so the world in which we live is going bad like cheese by the week. The aggression against the theory of creation and Christianity is growing at what seems to be this exponential rate. Right? And while this is really unpleasant and it's not fun, it shouldn't be a surprise, and you better know that it's going to get worse. It's extremely important that we understand what we believe and why we believe it, not just so that we can stand in the face of the opposition, but so that we can become this resource for those that are out there still trying to put together all the pieces and figure out what the truth is. Right? The information that I'm going to present over this week and next week, I originally wrote / compiled for a college retreat that happened at Lake of the Ozarks a couple years ago. Now, there was this one guy who came to this retreat just in an effort to get all of his friends to leave him alone about church. Right? He didn't want anything to do with it. This self-professing atheist who worked at a museum, you can see this was all a very encompassing part of his life. All right? He told me how he felt sorry for me that I believed all that nonsense of the Bible. He proceeded to explain to me why evolution was the only logical explanation for the origins and the existence of everything that we know as life today. He went on, and I just allowed him to speak for a while. After some time, it became apparent that this was not going to be something we could kind of close up in one conversation. So I invited him to come to the next day. I said, bring all of your information that you have about evolution. Bring even your opinions about Christianity with you. Tomorrow I'm going to teach a class, and at the end of the class, maybe we can just sit and we can talk about all of your opinions about all this information. And he gladly accepted and showed up the next day for the class. Well, as it turns out, at the end of the class, he got up from where he sat, which was on a couch about 3 people down from me the whole time. He looked at me with this expression like he didn't really know what to say. And before he shuffled out the door, and I mean shuffled, like he hadn't been to bed in 2 days, he mumbled something about having his mind blown. And I didn't see him the rest of the day. He was gone. That night, he showed up for a gathering, and he gave his life to Christ. He cried out with tears running down his face to the very God that he refused 24 hours earlier, refused to even acknowledge, and promised to follow him with whatever it took for the rest of his days. I was there when he did it. All right, now listen. I don't know if there's someone out here today that's struggling with this concept. Maybe, just like this guy, you've decided that this God of the Bible is all just fantasy and fairy tales. Look, I understand. I grew up around religious lunatics my whole life. I understand how you can think that. But I want you to understand this. An axiom of life that I have had proven to me over and over and over again is that truth and authenticity are not buried, they are revealed. They are verified in the presence of the counterfeit. So what I have to say today and next week is either going to deepen the loyalty of your convictions or it's going to reveal a flaw in your position. It can't be both, and I'm praying that it's not neither. You understand? I also want you to get this. There are three kinds of people, three attitudes I believe that exist in all things philosophical, all right, the realm of the religious, okay? First of all, there are truth seekers. All right? These people, they just want to know what the truth is so they can be there. All right? They have no interest in preconceived notions or tenets or rituals. All right? They don't have a need to be right. They just got a need to get it right. These are truth seekers. Just want to know what the truth is so they can be there. All right? Number two, there are sheep. These are the people who do what they've always done because that's the way it's always been done, because at some point in their past, probably by family, they were told this is the way you're supposed to do it, whether they understood it or they agreed with it or not. All right? Thirdly, there are what I call the wrecking balls. All right? These are the people who haven't got the stones to pick a position in life and live it. They just spend their entire existence trying to tear down the position of everyone else no matter what it is. All right? Now, so listen, if you're a sheep or you're a wrecking ball, it is my belief, unfortunately, that there's a great chance you may never come to see the validity of God as the creator of all that we know of life. Right? But if you're a truth seeker, if what you really want to know is what's the bottom line truth. Look, I don't really care about the religious people. I don't really have a particular need for science to be right. I just want to know what's right. Right? If you're there, it is also my belief that you will not leave this series thinking that evolution is even a possibility anymore. All right, so let's just get started. Since we're in church, why don't I just start with what I think is right? But I am going to give you two promises, right? First, there's going to be some scriptural references. That's just how it is. But the second promise is there will be no circular reasoning. All right? People in science seem to think that anyone with a religious perspective on this just dabbles in circular reasoning. We justify our position with one thing that they've already thrown out the window. All right? The argument that I will attempt to make for creation is going to be what I believe is the smallest of all three sections of this message: creation, evolution, and theistic evolution. Now, if you are science-minded or just science-convinced, all right, this is where I want to urge you to be disciplined, to test the evidence of all three sections with identical sets of criteria. It is my heart's desire that you actually come to discover the truth as you analyze and you consider the data and you apply a critical eye equally to all three areas. In doing so, it is my belief that you will no longer doubt the origins of life or what you're going to want to do next. All right, so let's begin. Why do we even want to discover, talk about, poke around in the origins of life? Why does it matter? All right. As people who accept and ascribe to this concept of creation theory, of an intelligent designer, right, we believe that self-worth and relationships originate with the one that we think created it all. Our existence, right? Because that's what we're trying to talk about. Evolution, creation, how did we come to where we are? All right. We believe that our existence is the very desire of God for an authentic relation interaction. We believe this is why it began. All right. So in today's selfie-driven society, let's just propose self-worth as a point of interest. All right. Which one appeals to you the most? All right. I am the intentional, unique, personal creation of a loving God, created to fulfill a specific purpose and given the free will to choose to participate or not, right? Or I am the direct result of random chemical reactions in primordial ooze. Okay, this is what we're talking about, the two opposing views. If we can slide aside any of these preconceived beliefs of what we think already is the truth, which would you prefer to be the truth? All right, let's talk about relationships. When it comes to the concept of relationships, what is God's design? The Bible makes it very clear that men are programmed, right, not with animalistic urges and no boundaries, but instead to be connected and loyal to one woman for the rest of his days. The caveman theory, all right, of relational interaction proposes that Men are programmed as a result of evolution to procreate as often and as quickly as possible. Modern man must suppress this urge in order to fit into modern society. All right, now, ladies, no matter what your current beliefs regarding the origins of the universe, I suspect that most of you will agree with me that this is more of an excuse, more of a rationalization for subjective behavior than an explanation for why men choose to do the things that they choose to do. For those of us that are followers of Christ, the Bible is the foundation of everything we believe. For us, this is the very directions, the very desires, the words of the one that we have come to recognize as our designer and our creator. The Bible assures us of its validity, and it communicates to us that its integrity is beyond reproach. All right, now this is where that potential circular reasoning thing comes in, because I can see most of you that are folding your arms going, here he goes. He's going to say that his belief is what it is and it's valid because his belief says it's true. All right, this is that circular reasoning. Look, this is not the argument. All right, I'm just merely presenting some exhibits of evidence. All right, so in addition, if we choose to believe any idea of this document, this Bible, then we must believe all of the ideas of the Bible. And as a result, we cling with confidence to the messages it provides, starting with the very first words of the very first page. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Not only do we believe that this is the truth regarding the origins of life, but this source, right, the Bible, it teaches us the perspective that we're supposed to have as we attempt to live out each of the assigned days that we're supposed to experience. All right? Psalm 139, 13 to 16. It says, "You make all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit them together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. It is amazing to think about. Your workmanship is marvelous, and how well I know it. You were there when I was being formed in utter seclusion. You saw me before I was born and scheduled each day of my life before I began to breathe. Every day is recorded in your book." All right, listen. The further that we get away from this first step of acknowledging God's involvement as stated in Genesis 1:1, the further we get away from understanding of and connection to God. If you are unwilling or incapable of acknowledging God as the originating point of life, there is no chance that you're going to understand anything else about Him. If you will not, let's say this is why it all starts. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, the beginning. All right, listen. If you will not believe that all things begin with God, there is no chance that you will ever be able to see ultimately how everything ends with God. All right? So how can anyone rationally believe in this theory of creation? All right? Let me begin by introducing you to a man named Ray Bolin. Not only is he the executive producer or executive director of Probe Ministries, he's a graduate of the University of Illinois with a bachelor's in zoology. From North Texas State University with a master's in population genetics. From University of Texas at Dallas, he's got a master's and a PhD in molecular biology. He was named the 1997, 1998, and 2000 Research Fellow of the Discovery Institute Center for the Renewal of Science and Culture. All right? He's got a resume. This is what Ray Bolin had to say. He said, "We must realize that the book of Genesis is the foundation of the entire Bible. The word Genesis means beginnings. Genesis tells the story of the beginning of the universe, the solar system, earth, life, man, sin, Israel, nations, and salvation. An understanding of Genesis is crucial to our understanding of the rest of Scriptures. For example, Genesis chapters 1 through 11 are quoted or referred to more than 100 times in the New Testament alone. And it is over these chapters that the battle for the primary battle for historicity, or the historical accuracy, all right, of Genesis rages. All of the first 11 chapters are referred to in the New Testament. Every New Testament author refers somewhere to Genesis 1 to 11. How can the first 11 chapters be separated from the rest of Genesis? The time of Abraham has been verified by archaeology. The places, customs, and religions spoken of in Genesis related to Abraham are accurate. The story of Abraham begins in Genesis chapter 12. if Genesis 1 is mythology and Genesis 12 is history, where does allegory stop and the history begin in the first chapter, 11 chapters? All of it is written in the same historical narrative format. Okay, so all of that to say this, all right? What he's saying is that science has no apparent issues with the things that they have verified through their own methods. You know why? Because archaeology is impossible to dispute. They have no issues. They agree with chapter 12 of the book of Genesis in the Bible. They have no issues because there's what? There's scientific evidence to substantiate it. Okay, so they're all good with that. The question has to be asked. Look, while they're still trying to dispute chapters 1 through 11 to doubt their historical accuracy and call them mythology, we have to ask the question, how is it that the context of these chapters is acceptable through science, yet the chapters themselves are not? Got to ask the question. Listen, talk about justifiable, just this subjective justification and reasoning. And ironically, all based on a lack of empirical evidence that they claim. Listen, we're going to deal with this double standard in a minute, but what cannot be justifiably or intelligently disputed is the fact that this entire document was written in the same historical format. Look, God designated the beginning. He drew the line in the sand and He labeled it the starting point. He created the heavens and the earth and all the inhabitants in the first 6 days, and on the seventh day He rested, pleased with His work. The Bible makes it clear that not only did God create everything that exists, but that He maintains all that He created. Colossians 1, 15-17. Christ is the exact likeness of the unseen God. He existed before God made anything at all, and in fact, Christ Himself is the Creator who made everything in heaven and earth, the things we can see and the things we can't. The spirit world with its kingdoms, its rulers and authorities, all were made by Christ for His own use and glory. He was before all else began, and it is in His power that holds everything together. Okay, listen. It is my belief that any theory of the origins of life to be considered valid has to answer at minimum these three questions. All right? Number one, who created? Isaiah 45:18. For this is what the Lord says. God is the creator of the heavens. He formed the earth and He made it. He established it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh and there is no other. Number two, how was it created? Isaiah 45:11-12. This is what the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, says, its Maker says. Ask me what is to happen to my sons and instruct me about the works of my hands. I made the earth and created man on it. It was my hands that stretched out the heavens, and I commanded all their host. All right. Third question, why was it created? Acts 17:26-27. From one man He has made every nationality to live over the whole earth, and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this, here's the why, so that they might seek God and perhaps might reach out and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. All right. It's important to note that evolution as a theory cannot answer any of these three questions: who, how, or why. Believe it or not, this is now where I'm going to stop with presenting evidence for creation. All right, there's not much, is there? But it's my belief that way too many people have attempted to persuade others of the validity of creation theory by an intelligent designer by using one source, the Bible, to justify its beliefs and its positions. All right? But the problem with that is this, that those who would stand for science, who would cling to the claims of evolution, they concede no respect for the Bible. And therefore, they will never be in a position to consider creation theory as coherent. So this is what I'm going to do today. Instead of standing up here explaining to you how much I believe what I believe or why I believe what I believe, more importantly, I'm going to show you why. Evolution and theistic evolution cannot be considered as valid propositions for two reasons. All right? One, science fails to produce the empirical evidence that they require of creation theory. Secondly, I'm going to show you that evolution and theistic evolution, they cannot be considered valid possibilities, and I'm going to do it using the very science that they claim is the basis of its argument. Because if I can get you to see how these two theories are not possible mathematically, empirically, then maybe you'll be more open to consider the fact that this theory to which I ascribe actually does work and is true. So let's talk about evolution. Are you ready? All right, it's going to get thick. All right, evolution. See if you can embrace this definition. The idea was to create a fair assessment. So see if this describes the theory accurately. All right, it's in your printout if you want to follow along, but listen carefully. Evolution. The theory that proposes that life originated with a single-celled organism that came into existence out of nothing and developed as a result of reactive responses to changes in environment. Follow me so far? All right. It further proposes that said changes occur in a non-directed, open-ended, self-manifesting or self-realizing manner without defined parameters or predetermined destination. All right, it's a mouthful, isn't it? So what it really is it's a reactive response, not a proactive response, right? A reactive response to environmental changes, right? Meaning that it had to adapt to survive, in a non-directed, since there's no instructions or instructor, open-ended, meaning there's no limit, since there was no predetermined path, there was no creator or guide, right? In a self-manifesting, so it did it on its own manner, without predetermined or defined parameters or a predetermined destination. All right, can you absorb this? I know it's thick, but if you can grasp this concept, if this definition is okay, no hokey pokey, I didn't put any little biased spin in it. Would you agree? All right, if you can get there, then this is where I begin making questions. So here it is. Can an organism evolve beyond the response elicited by the environmental stimulus, or beyond that organism's ability to understand the evolution that it has experienced? All right, you want to hear it again? Listen. Can an organism evolve beyond the need elicited by the environmental stimulus, or beyond that organism's ability to understand the evolution that it has experienced? All right, let me give you an example. Consider the complexity of the human brain. If an organism evolves, it does not evolve beyond the response elicited by the need in the environmental stimulus, all right? And it cannot evolve beyond its ability to understand or utilize the adaptation that it just went through. You understand? If an organism changes in response, which is what we're talking about in evolution, it cannot do so beyond what is necessary to overcome the deficit that was identified eliciting the response. Are you following? Which means if it responds beyond what is required, now it's being proactive, not reactive, and it can't follow the definition of evolution. You follow me? Are you sure? Okay, listen. The human brain is the most complex mechanism that exists, period. And yet, while utilizing the very mechanism, we are still unable to understand the full function and capability of the mechanism. Therefore, the capacity and the functionality is, by scientific observation and verification, it is unquantifiable, and therefore it goes beyond the concept of the evolutionary proposition. Do you understand this? The existence of the human brain, as complex as it is, it squashes the whole concept of the possibility of evolution, but it does satisfy the characteristics of a concept called potential. All right, we're going to come back to this just for a second. Dr. Eric Chudler, neuroscientist, right, research professor, executive director of the Center for Sensomotor Neural Engineering in Seattle, Washington, he had this to say. He says, quote, "From an evolutionary point of view, it is unlikely that larger brains would not have developed if there was not an advantage." Okay, a lot of doublespeak. I had to look at this one for a while, but here's what he's trying to say. He's saying that he cannot support this statement. It is unlikely that, right? He's saying larger brains would not have developed if there had not been an advantage, right? So what he's saying is that larger brains would have developed even without an advantage, right? This does not support evolutionary theory. It contradicts it. Now we've got brains that are developing without being necessitated by an environmental stimulus, right? Okay, look, I agree with this, but here's my point and the problem. This is what science is saying on one hand from an evolutionary standpoint, yet it contradicts itself. And then on the other side, we've still got science that says this. According to an article at newscientist.com, it is saying that the size of the human brain has not changed in 200,000 years. Okay, now I'm a little confused because on one hand I've got, it is unlikely that the human brain would have gotten larger, blah, 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 right? And on the other hand, I say, no, it hasn't changed in 200,000 years. So we've got this complex mechanism that either became this unquantifiable concept, either without outside influence, right, or it's been that way for at least 200,000 years. In either case, this is where we are. We have a mechanism whose functionality and capabilities are unquantifiable. Please explain to me how that is supported by any theory other than creation theory by the hands of an intelligent designer. Are you seeing this? Okay. How are we supposed to, as human beings, find any credibility in a theory which it proposes, it makes postulations regarding the development of species and then contradicts itself by giving examples of how that doesn't quite happen all the time? All right? And while we're in this neighborhood, let me just point this out. I was unaware that there was any actually existing documentation from the scientific community of 200,000 years ago substantiating the size of human brain matter at that time. Do you see where I'm going with this? Science refuses to give creation any valid nod under the auspices of a lack of empirical data that they require, yet at the same time, they fail to insist on upholding the same level of requirements of their own theory. Science refuses to hold their own theory's feet to the same fire. All right, you know what? I'll get back to this. Let's go back to the brain. All right. Evolution proposes that not only does everything evolve in response to environmental changes and a need to survive, it insists that only the strongest survive. You've heard this, right? Okay. This brings up a very important question. Are we really supposed to understand, are we supposed to accept that this system that is so complex, our inherent defensive mechanism against perceived environmental irregularities, this radar, we're supposed to notice this? Are we really supposed to believe this developed from the single-celled organism that sprang to life by itself and out of nowhere? Okay, we'll get back to this too. One last chance, brain evidence. A question's got to be asked about this assumption. How can an assumption like this be made, that there's no change in the size of brain matter over 200,000 years when there's no requisite empirical data available? Right? Listen, wouldn't it make much more logical sense to look at the empirical data that we do have? We have a mechanism whose function and capability is, by scientific verification and observation, unquantifiable. Wouldn't it make more sense to contemplate the ramifications of that concept instead of proposing theories about its progress and then trying to substantiate such theories with propositions that have no empirical data whatsoever? On one hand, we've got science that's throwing rocks at creation theory and Christianity, insisting that our belief in an intelligent designer is ridiculous because the only thing we have is the one source that they've said is invalid, in spite of the fact that archaeology has proven that scriptures are accurate. Yet they can make outlandish claims without any credible documentation, and we're supposed to just clap and accept it as fact. Things that make you go, right? All right, listen, let's talk about something else. Chronology. The age-old question is always searched to answer, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? You've heard this? Right. I'm much more interested to discover which came first, the need or the adaptation. If evolution is nature's way of responding to environmental changes, right, and the organism's need to change, all right, came first, the need eliciting the response, what initiated the need forcing the organism to adapt? Where did that one come from? Okay, here's another one. If an organism evolves in response to environmental changes in order to survive, and such adaptations require millions of years for that change to be realized, right? You've heard this. Does that mean that nothing else changed in that organism's environment during that entire time, allowing it to complete that specific necessary adaptation? All right, are you beginning to see that this proposition of evolutionary theory is just not a sound, coherent proposition? It just doesn't make sense. Earlier I said that the complexity of the human brain It squashes the entire concept but it does fulfill some specific requirements for this concept of potential. I said that. See if you can get a hold of this definition of potential. A predetermined set of parameters, which currently may be realized or unrealized, a finite variable that defines a specific level of performance or achievement. All right, does that make sense? All right, if you can get a hold of that, then you also see that there's no possible way of unlimited or endless potential, right? Okay, so let's think about this. What if an organism discovered, if it realized more of its own potential and as a result of modeling the new possibility, caused organisms to also respond in reactive ways and also discover some of their own untapped individual characteristics? All right, could this be a logical answer for the advancement or the progression of life? All right, realization of potential, get it? Realizing of potential, it absorbs and goes way beyond the whole concept of evolution. When an organism realizes untapped potential, it is now acting in a proactive manner, not responding defensively to environmental changes threatening its survival. When other organisms respond to that one and as a result subsequently discover other individual characteristics, gosh, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like the progression of mankind over the history of centuries, doesn't it? And it can only be explained because it's realizing of potential that was already there. It can only be explained by creation theory by the hands of an intelligent designer. Are you getting this? I mean, if you really just look at what's around us, if you really look back, I mean, you can look at technology of nowadays and you can compare it with just 100 years ago. All right, even if you don't believe that there's any history past, let's just say that life began 2014 years ago, right? From the beginning of 2000, from zero to what? To the 1900s? Not a whole lot of progress. From 1900 to where we are now, a light years different, right? But you see, this whole concept of realizing potential, that one figured this out and discovered this, and as a result of that, somebody else got inspired and did their thing, which then set this one off and this one off and that one off. All right, this is not a response. It's not a reactive measure to an environmental stimulus that caused it to move on. Do you see the difference? All right, listen. I know we're just getting rolling with all this, but now I'm out of time. So come back next week, and what we're going to do is we're going to continue our in-depth look at evolution. We're not even close to finished with this yet, all right? We're going to look at it from the perspective of scientific observation and experimentation in chemistry, specifically the structure of the carbon atom. We're going to hear from Dr. Hugh Ross, who has a PhD in astronomy, and Dr. Owen Gingerich, who is professor of astronomy, history, and science at Harvard University. We're going to talk about theistic evolution with the help of a Christian apologist, Greg Kuchel, and this is great. We're going to have a scientific explanation of polypeptide chains, amino acids, from ardent evolutionist and Nobel Prize winner, Francis Crick. At the end, I'm going to show you how mathematically evolution and theistic evolution are impossibilities. You don't want to miss this. Father, God, we acknowledge that you are God, that you are our Creator. And we exalt your name above everything else. We thank you for what you've begun to show us in all this, and we ask that you'd continue to reveal your truth, that you'd cause us to ask the questions that haven't been asked and to contemplate the stuff that hasn't been addressed. That you'd continue to use us in a way that will reveal your truth and that will open the eyes of the people who have been just snowed by all of the rhetoric of science, who wants to present their arguments and hide it and show double standards about what they expect. God, just continue to show us your truth so that we can not only stand on it for our own faith, but we can begin to help others understand the fallacy that science wants us to believe. We ask you to continue to bless and protect us according to our obedience. We ask all these things in Jesus' name so that you're glorified.